Hello and welcome to Creating a Life You Love with Adriana, where we talk about all things mental, emotional, spiritual health, and just how to create healthy lifestyles centered on the Lord, whether that's in your relationships, your friendships, work, just your daily life. And lately, I've been talking a lot about community. And this all stemmed from my husband and I. We decided to share our full story from how we went from breaking up to getting married a year and a half later. And this sparked a lot of interest from you guys about relationships. And while I want to talk specifically about relationships and give you breakup advice and all the things, I think what's something that we miss a lot is that it doesn't a really healthy relationship doesn't just take two people, but it takes all the people around you, your friends, your family, your community. And if you don't know already, if you haven't watched the last few episodes of this community series that I'm doing, this is all inspired by an organization called Practicing the Way, where essentially they are giving you these free resources to learn how to deepen your relationship with Jesus by reading the Bible, by fasting, by praying, by getting into a deep community where you can, grow together. And anyway, so I did this community practice, with this Practicing the Way organization at the beginning of the year with my friends in my community. And it really just gave me a new outlook on friendships and how it's not just important to have, the person that you marry or your boyfriend or girlfriend, but also friendships that are going to help you in your romantic relationships. And yeah, so with that all being said, if you haven't listened to the past three episodes where I've been talking about community, you can go check those out either before or after this. But essentially, what I've talked about so far is why we need community, why we need not just surface level friendships, but deep friendships. And then I talked about how confessing your sins and your struggles actually helps to heal shame and guilt, whether that's in romantic relationships or that is in friendships. So, with all of that being said, today we're going to dive a little bit into conflict and some of the reasons why having a relationship, whether that's romantic or platonic, you are going to encounter conflict and struggles. And I feel like we all crave someone to know us deeply. We all crave this feeling of belonging. But then when things get hard and when conflict hits, we tend to like walk away. And I've experienced in this. I would say, looking back to any friendships or relationships I had been in, anytime conflict would come, I would kind of back away. And I wouldn't back away in the way that I would just be quiet, zip, and let the conflict run its course. I would back away in the way that I would lash out, be defensive, and then pull away. And so it was very much this like push and pull with all my relationships, romantic or not. Um, and anytime I would start to get deep and actually get to know someone, obviously you're going to have conflict because if you are, uncovering certain beliefs that are different, or if you are just getting to know each other deeply, you're going to have conflict. You're going to disagree on things. I think there's this very like heavily focused phrase in our culture where people say like protect your peace. So if this person is like making my life harder than it would be if I was alone, I'm going to get rid of them. And I don't think that's wise. Obviously, I don't think toxic relationships are great, but this whole idea of anytime a little bit of conflict comes up, I'm going to run, not great, right? And so I've experienced that, like I said, in many of my relationships, specifically going to my relationship with Christopher. When we first started dating, we had a lot of conflict and we were both wondering, like, is it supposed to be this hard? Like, we're only a few months in. Why are we disagreeing? Why are we struggling? And everyone's different. Some people, they might reach that point in their friendship or relationship, or when they're, dating maybe a few months in, maybe a month in, maybe not even until they get married. It's so different for everyone. And I think it just depends on well, many factors that I'm not gonna go into now. But, with that being said, Christopher and I struggled, with conflict a lot, and so we broke up because we had a lot of, unhealed issues and wounds that we both were struggling with that just made us, like, butt heads. So, even when things were going smoothly, we both had, like, internal just chaos, you know? And so we took some time, broke up, healed. We didn't think we would get back together, right? But we did. And that's a whole nother story. So if you haven't heard that, go and watch this episode. I'll link it above. But when we got back together, we made a list of the things that, we wanted to change in this relationship, things that we didn't want to repeat and make the same mistakes of. And one of the things was conflict. I wanted to be better at sitting, listening to what the other person had to say, not getting defensive, and then after that, not pulling away and not running away, but instead drawing into the conflict and thinking, okay, how can I best serve this other person? And then how can I also be heard? How can we both come to like a mutual understanding? And this is something that, throughout the past year and a half of our relationship, I have come to terms. I have finally understood that just because you have conflict doesn't mean it's not a healthy relationship. And I think maybe even as Christians, we can kind of romanticize the idea of like Christian community and friends. And it's like, oh, it's so great because we all have love in our hearts and we're just going to like read the Bible together and like worship together and go on walks and like do everything together when that can be true. But there's also the deeper you go into friendship, the more conflict you're gonna have. And we see this in the church, Practicing the Way, the organization that I mentioned earlier. They actually talk about this, and they give a few examples about how the first century church was, generous and had radical love, and they were united, maybe not by blood, but by their common family in Jesus, right? And this same church though that we maybe look back to and we're like, "Oh, if only we could have like that church that the first century church had," they still had conflict. So if we look at First Corinthians 3, 1 through 4, Paul actually calls out the Corinthians for acting like, he says, mere humans because they're caught up in jealousy and quarreling. And essentially what's happening here is they're all saying like, well, I follow Paul, I follow Apollos. They're following different spiritual leaders, right? And they're divided over not even like doctrine, but just like personal preferences. And like, well, I like this person because they said this, and I like this person because they said that, and you're wrong and I'm right, you know? And so it's just like this back and forth. And so we see that today, whether it's with like churches, influencers, pastors, where we all have like this preference, and sometimes we can like put that preference on other people. Maybe you've experienced that and that's been some form of church hurt for you and kind of like shunned you out of the church. That's not how it's supposed to be. We are supposed to follow God and He is supposed to be our head. And of course, everyone's going to have differing opinions. But if we can respect that instead of saying, I'm right, you're wrong, like, I think that's helpful and healthy, right? We see in like Acts 14, 13, 36 through 41, Paul and Barnabas, they're both full of the Holy Spirit, right? And yet they still split up due to this disagreement that they had about someone named John Mark. So Paul didn't trust John Mark because apparently he previously abandoned their mission. And Barnabas was encouraging and was like, "Oh, well, I want to give him a second chance, like maybe this time will be different." And we all maybe have that friend where like they're just going to go for it and they're just going to give that person second chances and second chances, and then maybe someone else is more realistic and they're like, "No, I don't think that's a good idea." And maybe neither of them were wrong, but their conflict was pretty intense that they both parted ways. So two friends and ministry partners, they just went separate directions because they both had a different thing placed on their heart. And so even godly people with good intentions, they sometimes still clash and disagree, and that's not a bad thing. It's not a sign of failure. It's a sign of our humanity, right? And so we see, many other examples. If you want to hear more about this, definitely go check out the Practicing the Way fourth session on this because they go more in depth in like the church background, the historical background of community. But I just kind of wanted to emphasize that because I think it's really important to recognize that we can romanticize about having Christian community all day long and having deep, close friendships. But if we don't understand that it's going to be hard, anytime we have conflict, we're going to leave because we have this expectation of, oh, it's going to be just like sunshines and rainbows. And then we get in it and we're like, oh, this is hard. I'm going to back out. Right. I can see this in my and Christopher's life where we started this Bible study over Practicing the Way, their organization, listening to their courses essentially together. And we had some people from our church. We had some of my childhood friends, some of Christopher's friends that he met, when he moved here. And through this, the past year and a half, I think, we've been creating this community where we've tried to meet every week. Now, we were really excited about it at first. Last summer, we started. So I guess it's been a year now. Last summer, we started, and I was just felt like so on fire, was so excited after this Bible study that we hosted. And then slowly over time, it seems like, people were really enjoying it, but when we ended a section and then started another, all of a sudden people just kind of like slowly left. Whether it was they were too busy with work or they were traveling or whatever it was, there was just like this slow trickle out. And it was really upsetting because we had this expectation of like we're going to do life together, we're going to like see each other 3 times a week, not just at Bible study, but we're going to go out to eat together and we're going to go work out together and like these things where we're really going to live life together, right? And we had to kind of come to terms that not everyone is in that place. And who knows, maybe we'll find those people who are in that place that can do those things with us. But last year that just wasn't an option. And so we put a pause on our Bible study a few months in and decided to wait till maybe we had some other faces that could come or when people would be a little bit less busy, right? And so what happened was we had this excitement, these unmet expectations, and then we kind of withdrawed for a few months, honestly. We didn't plan even a restart date. It was just kind of like up in the air. And it was because we were kind of like hurt because we were excited about something. And I'd say Christopher, like he was more so leading this than me. So he was like really excited about this. And then slowly, when people started not seeming to be so excited, we had these unmet expectations and it caused us to want to withdraw. But we didn't. We came back this January after taking maybe like 4 months off and brought some new faces, brought some new people along. And are there times where people don't show up for weeks? Are there times where a few people don't show up for weeks? Yeah. Are they traveling? Are they busy? Yeah. And we still host our group every Thursday. And that's something that Christopher has really taught me of this idea of like having loyalty. I feel like our generation is so flaky, and this is something Practicing the Way talks about a lot. We're like, "Oh, I'll hang out with you maybe this time." And then that day comes around and something better comes along, so you kind of ditch that plan. And I'm definitely guilty of this. Maybe even subconsciously. Like sometimes I'll just like text someone like, "Yeah, for sure we can hang out." And then it's like in the back of my mind and I completely forgot and I covered it with other plans. And so like sometimes that's just how it is. And I feel like it's because we can text. Back then, we just had to call the person and be like, "Hey, we had to be like, "Hey, dinner at 6 on Friday." Okay, great. And then that's the plan throughout the whole week. If you wanna change it, you actually have to call the person and explain why. You can't just text them and hide behind a screen and be like, "Hey, something came up. Sorry, I can't make it," you know? And so I feel like there's this level of like, it is so much easier to just make up an excuse and just text behind the screen. And I've certainly done this before. Like, I maybe when I'm mentally not feeling well and I'm just feeling like really depressed, so I'll text someone who I had plans with, "Actually, I can't make it. I'm not feeling well." And in my mind, I'm thinking, like, well, I'm not lying, you know? I'm telling them I'm not feeling well. That could be physically or mentally. I'm just leave it to interpretation. But the thing is, like, if you want that to be a deep friendship, you have to tell them how you're feeling. Like, hey, I'm feeling really depressed right now. If you want to come by and just like hang out at my home, that's great. But I'm just not in the a good headspace to go out right now and like get dinner together, you know? And so be honest with them. This is something that like I still have to work on. I find myself, you know, maybe not telling the whole truth because I don't want people to feel sorry for me when really they would love to know, right? So, I went over that whole cycle of, excitement, unmet expectations, and then you kind of withdraw. But I wanted to talk about why conflict is the soil of formation, why it creates this. Maybe think about like when you fertilize the ground, maybe like cow poop or chicken poop or like whatever it is. I'm just thinking of chickens because I used to have chickens. And so, they'd fertilize the ground with like this not so great stuff and poop, and then something beautiful would grow from that, right? Like the garden or flowers. And that's what I kind of think of conflict. Like it's just this like gross, just muck. And it's just like, ugh, you don't want to be in it. But then it leads to something really great, which is advancing in your spiritual formation and growing you as a person. So, conflict, if we think of it as a spiritual discipline, not that you want to seek out conflict, but you can welcome it anytime it does come. It really exposes pride. It exposes fear, control, impatience. It trains forgiveness, empathy, humility. Those are just a few of the things. Um, I'm definitely, thinking of a few times with my husband where just the past few months, we've had conflict. Actually, we just had conflict like an hour ago on the phone. Because I poorly estimated how much time it would take me to get somewhere and kind of messed up our plans a little bit and didn't really think that one through. So that one was on me. And so something for me in the past few months of marriage that I've realized is that I really struggle with control. Yes, I do. So when we've gotten into conflict, this is such a silly example. Maybe you relate to this if you are married or in a relationship, but girls and guys, I feel like we have a little bit of different like cleaning standards, right? And this isn't to bash on guys or whatever, and this probably isn't true all the time, but this is just something that I've kind of noticed um in my own marriage. I like to shower every night. I want to be clean before I get into bed. I have to brush my teeth no matter how tired I am. And that's just my standard. My husband doesn't have to do that. If he's really tired, he's not going to shower. Sometimes he forgets to brush his teeth too. I'm gonna expose him right here. And I've probably done that when I was younger too. But now I'm just like, I cannot. Oh my gosh, like I feel the food on my teeth. Like I have to brush my teeth. So anyway, I have noticed, I have started an argument because he hasn't showered. And so I'm like, you have to shower right now. Like, this is disgusting. Go shower. And he's like, I'm literally exhausted. Like, I just need to fall asleep. And he's barely keeping his eyes open. And, he just falls asleep. And I'm practically like pushing him in the shower, like, literally, shower, please. And so this is something that's kind of started an argument. And I've learned that I kind of have an issue with control. Now, do I think it's good to shower after you work out still? Yes, I do. But I'm a little bit of a like germaphobe, like a little bit. Like if my if my husband like doesn't work out, doesn't sweat, and he's like, I didn't work out today, I didn't sweat, like I'm just not gonna shower. I will still, when I'm like giving him a hug, like put a blanket around me and like cover my body so I don't like contaminate myself with the dirt that he has on him. I'm like, what? What? So I've realized that that's a little bit crazy. So the other night I just said, you know what? If you don't want to shower, that's okay. I didn't pressure him and everything was fine. I'm still alive. Oh my gosh, amazing, right? And if you've been here for a while, you know that I kind of struggled with a metaphobia. If you don't know what that is, feel free to look it up. But that still is a little bit present in my daily life. Some tendencies and habits that I've picked up that I'm still trying to like defeat. And that's one of them. And so conflict, even though it seems so silly, of like, oh, you're having this argument over the shower, it exposes a deeper problem inside of me, which is that I still, number one, have issues with this phobia. And number two, I have problems with control. Even if it's like I want to do something and the other person I wanna go somewhere and the other person wants to stay home, and then conflict comes from that, it's kinda cool because I can see that, like, I was really trying to manipulate the situation to get them to do what I wanted to do. And so that's what I mean by conflict seriously can act as a spiritual discipline of, like, exposing pride, fear, control, if you allow if you allow it. Again, not saying go out and intentionally create conflict to get better at it. I'm just saying it's going to come around. So when it does, you can practice with that. Um, I think another thing that's also really important is like knowing your conflict style. Now, they don't really go into this in practicing the way, but I wanted to mention it because I feel like this is so important for whether you know your best friend and you constantly argue, or it's your spouse or your boyfriend or girlfriend or fiance. I feel like this is just really important. There are 5 conflict resolution styles that are widely recognized, and I'm just going to go over them now. So, the first one is avoiding, sweeping it under the rug, hoping it goes away. And this is often like fear based or driven by like discomfort of like, I'm scared. Maybe it's that you think that you are keeping the peace, but you're actually just delaying growth because anytime you have conflict, say the conflict is, you want to move somewhere and the person that you're dating doesn't. And so you see your future in this other state and they don't. Now, if you don't speak up and advocate for that and just sweep it under the rug, and maybe you find that out early in dating, right? That this person wants to stay in their home state forever and you're someone who like really wants to be adventurous and like leave, right? You get few years into your relationship and then you're about to get married and you have to figure out where you want to live. And now you're kind of freaking out because you remember that conversation you had 3 years ago that you just kind of swept under the rug cuz you didn't want to talk about it. And now you both have strong disagreements on where you want to live and you're 3 years in. And maybe this can be solved, like maybe you can communicate and fix that, but I'm just saying, especially like when you're dating, you do not want to sweep things under the rug because it's going to come up in marriage. So just take that as a little bit of advice. If you are either single or in a relationship, don't wait till you're married till you're married to bring up that conflict, right? Another conflict resolution style is accommodating. So this is kind of accommodating seems nice and great. Maybe you're saying, okay, you're right, I'm wrong. Like, I'm going to just allow you to make the decision here. We're good. Everything's fine. And this can create harmony. It can seem very like selfless and sacrificial. But if you're doing it with resentment or bitterness, like you really maybe you feel really burdened by doing the dishes every single day, and your husband and you both work the same amount of time, and he comes home and doesn't do anything, and you come home from work, you have to cook dinner, clean dishes, all the things. Now, if you bring that up to him, maybe he says, "Oh, well, it's just I work just more tiring hours than your job is a little bit more. You can just sit all day. So I just feel like it's better if you clean the dishes." Now, maybe that's true, right? But in your heart, you're like so frustrated and you're like, "Are you serious? Like, I'm just so overwhelmed. I'm so burdened, but okay, whatever." And you're just like, "Okay, sounds great. That's great." Now, what this is going to lead to is anytime you're doing the dishes, anytime you're doing anything that he's just sitting on the couch, you're going to be resentment towards that. Maybe you hear that his work was really slow today, and yet you're still cleaning and still doing the dishes. You know what I mean? So that's how resentment can kind of build up if you just are kind of passive and you're just like, okay, sure, whatever, what you want to do. Another one is competing. So this is like the I need to win, kind of rooted in control or like justice of like I deserve to win. But sometimes you can kind of forget that the resolution of the conflict isn't about being right, but about being loving. This is something that I've definitely experienced. I feel like I couldn't fit all 5 of these, which I'll go over the other 5. Well, let me go over the rest, and then I'll talk to you guys about where I kind of see myself, and then you can kind of think about where you see yourself, right? Okay. So, compromising. This is one that is much better. This is like the let's meet halfway kind of thing. So if it's the example about the dishes, okay, so I will do the dishes this night and you'll do the dishes the other night, and we'll just alternate, every other day. Sometimes there are only situations where you both aren't going to get what you want and you have to sacrifice a little bit, you know? The last one is collaborating. So let's work together for a deeper solution. This takes the most time and maturity, but definitely leads to the richest growth. And so collaborating, this doesn't settle for like 50-50 based on just these rigid kind of categories, but instead it seeks like understanding, shared responsibility. And for me, I think like I kind of mentioned earlier, I will kind of be defensive and maybe like rooted in control. And then after that, I'll kind of like withdraw and like avoid it, if that makes sense. So, like, I'll come in strong, lay out like why I don't like this plan, why I want to do it my way. And then after that, I won't even finish the conflict or the argument, and I'll just like walk away and be like, I can't do this anymore. We'll talk about this another time. Like, I can't talk about this anymore. So that's something that I have been working on. And if I do that, apologizing and, asking forgiveness. But overall, maybe you can ask yourself whether it's your best friend or your significant other, what is their default style? What is mine? And what would it look like to move towards collaboration instead of, one person's offensive, one person withdraws? What would it look like to have this mutual understanding where both of you are not talking in a tone, not yelling, and you're communicating your wants and desires, and then you're hearing each other, and then you're coming up with a solution? Wouldn't that be so great if we could just do that every single time? But we're not going to. We're human. We're going to mess up. That's the ideal. And so, all in all, instead of leaving when things get hard, whether it's in friendships or relationships, we need to lean in. And now, of course, there's circumstances where one person is mentally abusive, emotionally, physically, and that is a sign to leave or seek help, professional help. But I'm talking about maybe asking yourself, is there a conflict currently that you're going through where God might be trying to shape you through this? I think another thing, going back to last week, what I talked about, are you making room for confession? Not just correction. And what I mean by this is when conflicts arises, we'll often focus on like what the other person did wrong, like correcting them instead of confessing where we messed up as well. Now, maybe there's a circumstance where you did nothing wrong and it's the other person. And if that's the case, you should kindly bring that to them. And I think another thing that's really important is when, say, someone was, your best friend, say she was rude to you, instead of going up to her and saying, hey, you were really rude to me. Like, why are you so rude? And having that tone and like already having this attacking kind of argument, what is recommended to do instead is to say how you are feeling, say how it's affecting you. So instead of saying, you did this, you did that, say, I'm feeling really hurt. And of course, you can say you once or twice. So I'm feeling really hurt when you spoke to me in this way. Is something wrong? And like acting out of not just correcting, but asking what's wrong, or asking if there's anything you can do to help. And even if this person is totally unreasonable and they had no reason to do that to you, it's still making them, instead of you reacting the same way they reacted, you're reacting in a completely different way. And it's making them be like, huh, maybe I was reacting kind of insanely. And you just brought them down to the ground, right? To ground level. I don't know what that phrase is. But anyway, all in all, conflict is not the enemy. I think isolation is. So if we hide from community, if we hide from friends because we're scared that we're going to have conflict and we're going to disagree, it's going to make us feel lonely. Only loneliness will come out of that in the end from that isolation. I remember when something clicked for me. Christopher and I were having a lot of conflict when we first started dating again after the breakup. We were still having conflict. Look at that. And I still thought that conflict meant it was an unhealthy relationship. Now, I'm not talking about like screaming, yelling, nothing like that. I'm just saying like we disagreed on a lot of things, right? And I remember I was with my friends one day and we were talking about something biblically, not like there was no clear black and white answer in the Bible. And so we were kind of talking about this gray area of what we believe, and we all believed very different things. And in that moment, I just had this feeling of like, I want to run away from this. I want to leave. Like, I cannot stand this. I just had like my blood was boiling, right? Because I hated when other people didn't think, didn't feel the same way that I did or believe the same thing that I did, right? And in this moment, because I was, again, like I said, I was struggling with conflict with Christopher and I was wondering, like, is this a healthy relationship? Should we still be together? I don't know. And at that moment, maybe it was a few hours later when I calmed down, I realized I don't just have conflict with Christopher. I don't just have this feeling of wanting to run away from conflict with Christopher. I have it with my friends and with anyone. It's only because I'm not having so many deep conversations with my friends. I'm having more deep conversations with Christopher that I feel it more with him than with them. But it was just such this like eye opener of like, it's not my relationship with Christopher. It's me. It's me. It's literally me. And so ever since that moment, maybe a year ago, I have really come around to be more calm when my friends are disagreeing with things on about whether it's the Bible or whatever it is. I feel like I don't have to get my way. I just understand that like the Lord will correct them if they're wrong and he'll correct me if I'm wrong. And we can talk about it civilly and I can ask them questions of why do you believe this thing? And I can just understand more instead of trying to put my beliefs on them. And I feel like that's really what's needed in the whole Christian church because we see that a lot. It separates people because they're trying to put their convictions and what they believe on other people without hearing their perspective. And so it's just not creating a very healthy environment. So, lastly, last thing that I wanted to do, practicing the way has you do this little exercise where you close your eyes and imagine your life in 3 to 5 years from now and imagine your ideal vision of living in community. Would it be, you're having a Bible study weekly with your friends? Maybe you have kids by that time. So you're having like play dates with them. You're going to lunch with a friend every week and confessing the things you're struggling with and praying for each other. What's like your ideal vision? And then how do you dream of doing life in a more relational way, having community more often? They ask you, what close friends do you have? What rhythms do you live by? How do you move through life together? And so you can, write this down, bring the Lord into it, kind of ask him like, where should I be, right? And then, well, this is actually what I was going to ask you next. What next steps do you sense the Spirit inviting you to take towards that vision? So maybe you don't have a Bible study set up yet, and you don't even have one single friend that's close to you that you can share your struggles and pray with. So maybe your first step is getting together with an acquaintance who you don't really know super well, but you want to get to know better. And you go to get food together and you talk to them about their week and ask them their highs and lows of the week and just open up that conversation. Um, Whatever it is, I just feel like it's so important to take that next step. You can't, if you want to run a marathon, you can't start by running a marathon. You got to start by maybe walking and then running a mile and then 2 miles. And so it's the same with these spiritual practices of community. You got to start where you are, not where you think that you should be, right? And so for me, what that looks like is I want to start meeting weekly with my friends and having like a time dedicated to prayer and talking about what we're struggling with. Because I already have a Bible study group that we meet weekly, but this is more of like an intimate 2, 3 people as opposed to like 15 people, if that makes sense. So that's what I'm implementing, my next step. And if you want to go through these questions and like actually write them down, Practicing the Way has like a whole PDF on this. So definitely go check that out. But all in all, I hope this was helpful to you. I hope you could gain some clarity if you're going through conflict in your own life, that it doesn't mean that you have an unhealthy relationship or friendship. It just means that you're human and we just have to learn how to deal with conflicts in a healthy way. That's all. But with all that being said, I hope you enjoyed this series on community. There's definitely more to be talked about when it comes to relationships. And so I'll definitely go into that more. But if you did enjoy this episode, make sure to like, share with a friend if you want, and comment if you have any questions or want me to clarify anything. And I hope I see you next week for another episode of Creating a Life You Love. I hope you have a wonderful week and that we can continue to create a life we love together. Bye bye.